Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Viking Update Show here on Talk North, brought to you from the Aquarius Services home studios. I am Jon Krawczynski from The Athletic, and normally on this podcast, we are joined by Jim Souhan from the Star Tribune to talk all things Vikings. Jim is down at the Masters in Augusta this week, a very difficult job. Feel for him down there, and kind of really toiling with the unwashed and in difficult circumstances. But so he is out, and so we are glad and happy to be joined by my colleague at The Athletic, Alec Lewis. A little reminder here before we get started: we are brought to you by Aquarius Home Services. We are brought to you by TSR Injury Law, Twill, and Defined Destinations. And we will hear a little bit more from those sponsors a little bit later. But today, with the draft just around the corner, I thought it was a perfect time to bring in Alec Lewis, who has been doing some incredible reporting, trying to read tea leaves, kind of looking through the entire situation here with the Vikings in what is expected to be an incredibly important draft for this franchise, for the future of it. But Alec, thanks for joining me. And I wanted to just start out with a question for you that I wonder if you know the answer to. Do you know who owns the Minnesota Vikings?
First off, thanks for having me, John. Good to be here. And I think you just have me every year when Jim gets to do the thing that we all would love to do. You just go walk around the nicest patch of grass on earth once a year. And so I get to fill in. It's really great and really happy that he gets to do that. Do I know who owns the Minnesota Vikings?
Yeah.
Yes, I believe it is the Wilf family. I feel like this is a trick question. I don't.
Well, no, I'm just I just wanted to get it clear because that puts you a little bit ahead of me in our respective beats that we follow. Like, you know who the owner of the Vikings is. That's great. That's awesome.
It is a good start. Usually it's pretty important to I mean, I would expect typically to have a pretty good idea of that.
Yeah.
But
there's Mark Wilf isn't like having some sort of power struggle with the Prince estate or with Kirk Cousins didn't get any ownership right in that last contract, and so they're not fighting over that, and so we're good there. That's a good place to be.
Though. I mean, Kirk, let's be honest. I mean, I don't know, equity, whatever. No, but it's pretty calm over here, as I'm sure you've seen on Twitter. In a much different way than what's going on over there. Can't imagine it. Can't believe it. But yeah, I mean, you're grizzled. You're ready for. I mean, you know how to operate around something like this.
Yeah. It's the success on the court has been unfamiliar, but this other stuff, like this, feels like home for me. So we're in good shape. But we will get to that on another podcast. And Alec, let's start with, we are a week away essentially, whereas we record this on Friday, from the draft a little bit, and I just want you to set the scene for us on where things stand. For me, it feels like this offseason, this draft preparation, this draft run up and lead in has been twice as long as what it normally feels like. And maybe that's just because of all the anticipation with what the Vikings might do or might not do. But as we sit here today on Friday, April 12th, what's your kind of read of the Viking situation as the draft approaches?
Yeah, this offseason has really been like a two-step waiting process. It was a 2-month period to see what would happen with Kirk Cousins, and now it's been like a 2-month period to see what they do at quarterback and in the draft and what they do in the draft. And obviously they've acquired the number 23 pick. So you look at their situation, they have 11, they have 23, and then there are multiple teams at the top that are in need of quarterbacks that might ultimately be willing to move out. And so Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, the Vikings GM, talked this week, and you're obviously, to your point earlier, always trying to read how much of what he's saying is strategy on his part and how much of what he's saying is what he really believes. But as we sit here with a week or so or more until this thing happens, I mean, to me, it revolves around quarterback, and it revolves around three different possibilities, and some might be more likely than others. But you either give up a really, really big haul probably for a guy like Jaden Daniels or Drake May. You either give up a fairly sized haul for a guy like J.J. McCarthy, or you stick and pick for guys like Michael Penix and Bo Nix. And in my opinion, just thinking about where this team is with Sam Darnold on the roster, with Kirk Cousins gone, and with where ownership probably wants to take this thing, you have to land one of those five in some facet or some fashion or some form. If you don't, there will probably be a watch in Egan, Minnesota, but how they end up deciding how much capital and draft capital to allocate to go get their guy depends ultimately, in my opinion, on Kevin O'Connell's evaluation more than anything else. Who does he believe is better than the others, and how much better? And is that enough to spend a lot of draft capital? And that ultimate assessment to me will dictate how aggressive and how much risk they're willing to take on come draft night.
And I think even this morning, I may have gotten this right. There's a report out there that the Vikings have another private workout with Jaden Daniels from LSU. I don't know. Can you confirm that, or is that true? And B, do you think that we should read into that anymore as another late try and push to get more eyes in front of him and get more experience around? Does that lead you to lean in any one way about their possibilities or what they would want to do in this situation?
Yeah, that's correct. They do have they've been trying to set that up, and I do believe they're going to be able to make that happen. Jaden has it's been kind of an interesting process for him. I think he met pretty late with the Commanders. I think he's meeting with the Giants. In terms of, does that sway anything for? Not really. I mean, I don't totally believe the timing of when these private workouts happen is something that should be read into. Ultimately, Kevin O'Connell said in Orlando at the owners' meetings, like, we don't want to do this process the way teams have always done it, where you just parade around pro days, you take pictures with the guys, you show your face, you smile. It's like, we want to give ourselves the best possible chance to evaluate these guys at the highest level. And it's really hard to do because simulating an actual NFL game is impossible, but you can simulate what it's like with them in the meeting room. You can simulate what it's like to teach them something in the meeting room and then see how they react and adapt to that on the field. And so that has been the focus, I think, internally with how they evaluate all these guys. I can tell you this. I had a conversation with a position coach who told me that in some of their draft meetings this year, and I think in years past, but specifically this year, a lot of the other positions, and I'm talking running back or edge rusher, a lot of the grades have been shown on the screen in some of their draft meetings. And quarterback, with the quarterback position specifically, they haven't. The coaches' grades have not been shown. I think a lot of that is to keep bias and just internal probably noise away from this process. They're that intentional about it. I really think it means a lot to Kevin O'Connell to do this process the right way, because I think he believes if you do that, you give yourself the best chance of it working out in the long run. And when I say it working out, I mean, this is a really uncertain probability is not the highest in terms of hitting on something like this. So I think you try to give yourself the best bet, and that's what the Vikings have done with scheduling these private workouts with really all five guys I know other than Caleb Williams, who is expected to go number one.
Do you have a favorite right now? Just for you personally, the guy you like or the guy you think fits really well with what the Vikings want to do?
Man, that's a great question. I wouldn't consider, like Paul Allen would say, elite quarterback mind or whatever. I don't really categorize myself as that, but I have watched a lot of tape on all these guys. I really have. Like I made a spreadsheet beginning maybe like January 12th, where I went through all five guys and watched multiple games of all 22 film through this crazy huddle connection thing that I have. And I mean, to me, I'm looking for some of the qualities that Kevin O'Connell always talks about: the accuracy, the big field vision, the ability to throw from the pocket, and then maybe use your abilities to create outside of it. And so I mean, the guy to me that maybe fits all of that I would still be hesitant about is Jaden Daniels. I mean, people think of this guy as this crazy athletic, just like runner of the football. But if you really watch the tape, and I mean, there are specific games like Auburn, like Mizzou, like Army, where you watch him and he goes through reads, 1, 2, 3 full field reads. He stays in the pocket. His arm action's pretty crisp. So that's a guy just based off the tape that I really like, and I think I'd feel more comfortable with than the others. Now, that might be why the Washington Commanders, a lot of people think, are going to take him at number 2. And the other guys, I mean, the Drake Mays, the J.J. McCarthy's, even the Michael Penix's, I mean, there are times where it looks really good. And there are times where J.J. McCarthy on third down is making really impressive throws. But there are also times where you just scratch your head with all three of those guys about some of the accuracy, about some of the pocket movement, about some of the decision-making. And so I asked Kwesi Ofomensa this week, like, how do you manage the uncertainty? And that's just what it is when you have a lot of prospects like this. So I would say ultimately to me, Jaden Daniels would probably be the bet I would want to make. Now, it might take a ton to do that, and I also admit that the odds that I'm right are very low. That's just how it is.
Yeah, well, and really, like, the odds that anyone is right are very low. Right. I mean, I know, like, I love Ryan Russillo's bit on this that he does all the time, and if you really go back over, let's even say just the last 10 years, and look at who has panned out and who has not at quarterback in the top 15 picks in the NFL draft, even in the first round in the NFL draft, the hit rate is remarkably low for guys, executives, scouts, coaches who have spent their entire lives dissecting film, trying to find the right fits and projecting what is going to happen. It just is going right now. We are, and I guarantee on draft day, everyone is going to talk about every one of these quarterbacks, and no matter who the Vikings pick, no matter who the Commanders pick, no matter if the Patriots do something, the Giants, whoever, like, it's all going to be spoken of in general, like, well, yeah, this is going to work out. Like, these guys are really good. There's a reason they're drafted this high. And the reality of it is 5 years from now, we'll look back and probably at least 3 of them will not have a second contract with the team that drafted them. That's just the way that this goes for whatever reason.
Yeah. And Kwesi Ofomensa made an interesting comment this week, and it was really based upon a question that I've just thought a lot about. And, like, how much of a quarterback that you draft success is based upon the circumstances he's walked into, which is like nurture, versus just his own ability and his own makeup and that nature. And Kwesi Ofomensa said, if you look at a lot of the quarterbacks that have been who have been drafted, who have had success, they're on a lot of good teams. They're surrounded by a lot of good coaches. They're in environments that allow them to develop and grow. And he said, like, so you look at some of the historical odds generally, and it might look low, but he kind of hinted at, you want to give yourself the best chance, and to do that, you surround them in an optimal environment. And you got to give the Vikings credit for the fact that over these last couple of years, if they've done anything, it is that they have built an infrastructure to plug a guy in like this and give him the best chance to work. Ultimately, will that matter? Like, I don't know. I don't know how much of it might ultimately depend on whether Drake May or J.J. McCarthy or Michael Penix or any of these guys can see the field effectively, or whether they're willing to be the leader that Tom Brady or Patrick Mahomes ultimately is. Like, maybe that ultimately is the deciding factor. But the Vikings, at the very least, have put together a really impressive skill group, a coaching staff that has a lot of quarterback knowledge. And we think about Josh McCown and the fact that he literally worked with Bryce Young, who was the number 1 pick last year, and has the data points of why or why not things may have gone well or things did not go well in Carolina. So that is the one thing that I think a lot of people will ultimately study how this goes, because of the amount of work the Vikings did on the front end to put this potential draftee in the best possible situation.
We're joined here by Alec Lewis at The Athletic, Vikings beat writer extraordinaire. I'm Jon Krawczynski on the Viking Update show here. We are coming to you live from the Aquarius Services home studios here at Talk North. And we will get back to a lot more about the quarterback situation, about maybe what the fans are telling Alec, and kind of run through a few scenarios. But first, I did want to mention that we are brought to you by several sponsors who have been supporters of the show for a very long time, and we're very appreciative of it. And the first one is Defined Destinations. Looking to spice up your adventures? Well, you're in luck. Meet Defined Destinations, your local tour company based right here in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area with over 25 years of experience crafting unforgettable group tours. At Defined Destinations, they're all about making travel easy and oh so exciting. Their 2024 lineup is jam-packed with epic destinations and experiences that are hard to find on your own. From the sun-kissed shores of Croatia to the pasta paradise of Italy, they've got you covered. Plus, they include airfare, tasty meals, and must-see attractions. It's like a vacation jackpot. So go to defineddestinations.com, where every journey is an adventure. We are also brought to you by TSR, Twill, and Aquarius Home Services.
Scott for Aquarius Home Services. We all know knowledge is power, right? It isn't what you know, it's who you know. Did you know that Aquarius Home Services also provides amazing plumbing and electrical services? That's right. From fixing flickering lights to leaky toilets to installing a new water heater. Find out for yourself with $98 off any electrical or plumbing repair. Schedule today at AquariusHomeservices.com and they'll take care of the rest. Aquarius, earning the right to be recommended.
I've been telling you about my favorite men's clothing store, Twill, in the Edina Galleria. Twill is incredibly proud to announce that they've added Samuelson to their family of brands. And Scott Dayton, the owner, proprietor, longtime friend of mine, longtime friend of TalkNorth.com, is very picky about who he adds to his family of brands. Twill is a fabulous assortment of suits and sport coats from Samuelson to get you ready for all of your upcoming spring and summer events. Join us at Twill Thursday, April 4th, for their first ever made-to-measure event with Samuelson. Our representative Dorian Anderson will be in the store to help us introduce this brand and assist with your purchases. Special promotions will be included during this event. So go to Twill for all of your spring clothing needs, whether it's shorts for golf, dress shirts, golf shirts, accessories, gifts, fine suits and sport coats, of which I have purchased myself. But check out the Samuelson event this April 4th. If you can't get there for that, just go check it out any other time. Great people, great clothes. I highly recommend it. And a reminder, TSR Injury has been sponsoring the network for a long time, and they always say, keep it simple. If you're injured, you just call 612-TSR-TIME, 612-TSR-TIME. They will take good care of you. They will not charge you unless they win your case, and they win so many cases they've become a company that can have billboards all over the place, even with Steve Terry hanging out with Nas Reed. 612-TSR-TIME.
All right, we're back here now on the Viking Update Show with Alec Lewis. And Alec, what I've always found to be a very sound strategy when you're faced with a very big decision is to ask the fans what they would do, because they typically have the right answers. They typically know, they've done their homework. They look at things very, soberly, very level head and calm and cool, and they dissect the possibilities, the analytics of it, and come to a dispassionate answer. And so I know that you did something kind of like this with the Vikings poll at the Athletic recently. What did you find that the fans kind of responded with here?
Yeah, it all started because I did one mock draft, I got screamed at. I did a mock draft where I did something totally different, I got scremed at, and then someone in the comments. Did they show up at
your door or something, Alec? I think when you said you were going to trade down
in Northeast Minneapolis. There were signs outside. No, when you do a mock draft, you're inviting people to show up, and there's no question. But someone commented, and they're like, every time I read these, every fan is mad at every possible scenario. So what would the fans actually want? And I took that and I was like, I told my editor, I'd actually be curious to know. We got 3,800 responses, which I thought was pretty solid. And I think the majority of them were like, look, trade anything you got to trade for Drake May. I think the second most popular option was trade a couple first-round picks for J.J. McCarthy. And then the third most probable, most liked option was to stick and pick with Michael Penix. And each of those was like 30% went with Drake May, 20% went with J.J. McCarthy, 20% went with Michael Penix. So you can see through those responses that, like, obviously do one, there's going to be a lot of people that are unhappy with the other. So it's pretty reflective of, I think, the response that we've gotten. But the fact that so many Vikings fans, I think, are willing to for once and forever take this big shot that they have not taken in the past. And that it feels like fans are like, we've tried everything else. We've traded back into the first round and grabbed the second tier. Teddy Bridgewater, obviously, it was an unfortunate situation, and who knows what would have happened had he stayed healthy. But it feels like most fans are just ready to do what the Bills did with Josh Allen, the Chiefs did with Patrick Mahomes. Now, I just gave you two examples that worked. There are a lot of examples that didn't, and so it'll be so interesting to see, depending on what happens on draft night, what the response is, just given the amount of differing opinions among the very rational and very studied sect of people that are the fan base.
Yeah, and I mean, what we're talking about really here is that ideally, you pick the right guy and he's your quarterback for 10 plus years and everything goes great. But I think also that what we know is that this is really at least, a 3-4 year commitment, because even if the quarterback is not particularly good, even if he doesn't pan out, quarterbacks typically get a lot longer leash than, you draft a cornerback in the first round and he doesn't work out. You draft, offensive lineman, whatever it is. It feels like there's an obligation to keep trying with that person, because if it doesn't work out and you don't maximize him, Kwesi and maybe even KOC, they're probably looking for jobs if this doesn't happen anyway. So there's a lot like that hinges on the idea of drafting a quarterback.
Yeah, and it's like anything in life. It's like you invest a lot in something, you want it to be good, you want to make it work. It's like if I buy something that I spend a lot on, like I'm gonna cling to it, and then if it's like, man, this isn't good, you try, like you want it to work so bad, you've invested so much. There's some probably fallacy related to that I'm not studied enough to provide you, but you're exactly right in that. I mean, it's such a massive decision for this organization. And what's interesting is, I mean, obviously the preferred option would be you draft a guy who puts you into the arms race of the NFL, where you're competing alongside with Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. I mean, obviously every team is seeking the quarterback who, even if you pay them $60 million a year, you're going to be competing every year because of how much they cover up elsewhere. The odds of that happening, like I've said 7 times on this podcast already, are pretty low. And Kwesi Adofo-Mensah is aware of this. And something he talked about this week that I thought was interesting was there is a world in which you don't get that guy, the top tier guy, but let's say you get the 14th best quarterback who for 4 years you're paying on a rookie contract, which means you have the amount of money to plug holes elsewhere. And if you look around the league, like the San Francisco 49ers, they've kind of operated with this. Brock Purdy, really good quarterback, has had a lot of success, but his rookie contract has allowed the 49ers to pay so many stars. And you pair that with a really brilliant coach in Kyle Shanahan, who executes a really impressive and forward-thinking offense, and you have a team that competes yearly. And so that is the other alternative if in the best-case scenario of if the Vikings can't land the guy who puts them in the arms race of the quarterbacks at the top of the scale within the NFL. And so finding again, it goes back to the evaluation and what Kevin O'Connell ultimately, who knows the position better than anybody else, feels and trusting that. And I think that if I were ownership, I mean, that's in this situation, You trust the guy who knows more about what the position entails and what it means to marry that in a successful situation. And if you do that, you probably give yourself the best probability of this working out.
Alec, do you as you have sort of made your calls and done your reporting, is it your interpretation that is it likely that whoever they draft, barring some out of this world offseason program and training camp, would start the season on the bench behind Sam Darnold? Do you think that is the Vikings' preference, or are they leaving it open? Will it be an open competition? Getting back to what you said about the infrastructure and about providing a young quarterback with what he needs to develop in the right way. I think it obviously includes coaches, it includes weapons, it includes offensive line, but I think it also really includes in general, the ability to not be rushed into a situation as well if you're not ready for it. So what do you think? Where do you stand on their position on Sam Darnold and what they think is going to happen at quarterback for the very immediate future here?
Yeah, sitting the guy would 100% be their preference. I mean, I know that from talking to a lot of people. I mean, to have the guy sit, develop, and not have everything on his shoulders as this thing gets going. I mean, that would be what Kevin O'Connell, just having studied it, and what Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, having studied it, would want to happen. Now, the problem is, and while I do believe that Kevin O'Connell and this staff believes that they can get more than ever out of Sam Darnold, the issue is you're going to have a locker room of 52 other guys who watch them on a day-to-day basis. And ultimately, if they feel like the other one, the young guy, gives them the best chance to win, it's hard to quiet that noise. The other dynamic is you're going to have ownership, which it potentially watches and gets excited about this young quarterback. And can they sit quiet and sit disciplined, knowing that ultimately in the long run, it might be best for that guy to continue sitting. And then the other element is you got a head coach and a GM entering their third season. So if they feel like their jobs are close to being on the line and this young guy gives them the best chance right now, that ultimately that dynamic might play a role. So all of those factors, I think, can lead to some irrationality in this process where the decision makers know that probably they want, and the best situation for the young guy is to sit him and have him develop. And ultimately, I think this is a pretty disciplined group among ownership and Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. They think long term in most cases. I mean, Mark Wolf talked about this specific idea at the owners' meetings in Orlando, so he's mindful of it. But as a former GM said to me a week ago, essentially, he's like, to succeed in the NFL, a lot of these owners, it's really a question of how much can you stomach and how much grit can you have going through tough times. And so how those dynamics play a role in the ultimate development is a fascinating thing to me, maybe not to everybody else, but you're exactly right to me in that the infrastructure for a young quarterback to succeed is not just the skill players. It's not just the coaching staff. It's not just the easy nature of picking up the scheme, but it is like, what plan do we have for this guy and how willing are we to stick to that plan?
Yeah. And I also think like one thing that will be interesting in this particular case is I think it is easier to sit that first round quarterback if Alex Smith is your starter, if Aaron Rodgers is your starter, if you have established quality competency at that position. Where we have seen teams struggle more with it is, in New England, if you have Bailey Zappi or Jacoby Brissett or whoever they had in front of Mac Jones, like if you have, other places where you do not have that proven player who doesn't have to be, he doesn't have to be an all world, quarterback like Aaron Rodgers was in Green Bay, but like just to have someone that is going to be competent running a team and can get the confidence of the other 52 guys when, it may even be clear like, hey, this young guy has a lot more talent, but this older vet really knows what the heck he's doing. We trust him. And we just haven't seen that from Sam Darnold yet. He's got a lot of people who think so highly of him, and it just has not worked out on the field. And so that could be a challenge just in terms of, is Sam Darnold ready for this responsibility? Is he capable of doing it? Even at a mid level, that would not, just not be a case of like, all right, we can't keep doing this week in and week out.
This topic actually came up at the combine. I remember talking to some people, a couple agents, and they were like, look, Kirk's going to ask for this amount of money. And maybe there is a world in which part of the calculus and why you would bring back Kirk is literally what we're talking about. So you maintain a level of stability and trust in that spot, both within the locker room, among coaching staff and ownership, to where ultimately that guy has the runway to be able to not only learn from a guy like Kirk, but also not have to be thrust in the fire. Ultimately, the contract situation played out the way they did. I don't think anybody now is saying, I mean, you got to pay Kirk Cousins $160 million so that you develop the quarterback optimally. But it was, I think it's really a valuable conversation to have, because it's something that people were talking about months ago. And you make a great point. I mean, Sam Darnold, look, his last 4 games in Carolina, he did some solid things. He played a couple games last year. I've watched the tape on it. It feels like some of his ability could work in a Kevin O'Connell offense. But as well as I do, John, like, this league is so week to week that if it starts to go bad, I mean, it goes bad fast and the noise gets crazy, and it's just a tough place to be, both externally with public pressure, but also internally with how players in the locker room see things. So it's another dynamic to this thing, another tentacle of it that is worth considering, and makes just this next year for both the decision makers of this team and just in the long term of what this organization is going to look like. It is a layer of it that is fascinating. And again, I strongly believe that as other GMs find jobs in years from now and ascend into those roles, this is a situation that I believe many of them will look back on and analyze and assess and use kind of as a data point for the decisions they may or may not make.
Well, this is great stuff, Alec. It is going to be an incredibly interesting draft night, which was fun. Like that, going into these nights, thinking, hey, if they can get, a guard, if they can get, a linebacker, those are all important positions. But when you have this sort of level of intrigue, it makes for compelling stuff. Do you have anything you can plug for our listeners that you're working on, or leading into the draft that you feel good about, that people need to keep an eye out for?
Yeah, there are a couple things. One is kind of on draft strategy in general, and a lot of these dynamics that I've just talked about. I talked to a lot of former executives, GMs, just about what it is like when there are so many competing incentives in the room, and how complicated it can make things. I mean, working on a lot of Viking specific, just quarterback thoughts, ideas, some of the history. So it should be a pretty jam-packed next couple of weeks. But you're exactly right. Like I joke about kind of the fan perspective, and can joke about just being exhausted of some of the speculation, all this stuff. But it is really fun, and you can, I think, see the hope within this fan base that has been beaten down so many times over. So it's been fun to be a part of it. I'm really excited to see what happens, and looking forward to just grinding the next couple weeks as you get ready for what hopes to be a lengthy playoff run for you.
Yeah, man, I can't wait. Really enjoy reading your coverage all the time at The Athletic. Can't thank you enough for spending a few minutes here on this Friday morning. Also want to thank Aquarius Services Home Studio. I want to thank TSR, Twill by Scott Dayton, and Define Destinations for their support of this show. Also, a big shout out to our Do Everything producer, Brandon Morton. Quick reminder and announcement that the Jon Krawczynski show will be live at Head Flyer Brewing on Tuesday, April 16th, 6 p.m. president of basketball operations, Tim Connolly, will be our guest. So if you want to get some Timberwolves playoff preview and have some good beer at Head Flyer, come on over. And we will also record a Jon Krawczynski show to release later today as well. But until next time, I am Jon Krawczynski. He was Alec Lewis with The Athletic. Thanks all for joining us, and we'll talk to you next week.